I don't normally lead with a brag, but I hope you'll humor me just for a few moments. I've had the coolest job on the planet, and my cool job consisted of reading scripts, giving feedback to writers, producers, and directors, and being a part of a really smart team of people who decide what does or doesn't become a television show. For 10 years, I was a creative executive at CBS. You know, the broadcast network responsible for The Big Bang Theory, Survivor, and a ton of crime shows, like not one, not two, not three, but 7 different NCIS shows. Television has always been a big part of my life, and I have such great memories of growing up and hanging out with my family on our old tattered couch, watching reruns of The Muppets and Matlock. So it was an incredible feeling to be part of something that was so powerful and influential. I didn't start at the top of the food chain, though. My very first gig at CBS was on the bottom rung of the ladder. Literally, my office was in a dark, dark basement where they stored old costumes from the Carol Burnett show. And after a few years, I was promoted to adult prime time. My new office was on the top floor where all the cool people were, and they even had windows. It was actually kind of unheard of to go from kids programming to playing with the grown-ups. Think sippy cup to sippin' whiskey. That external validation, it made me feel special, like I was talented and worth investing in. And as I rose up the ladder, my opinions became sought after. And with that, the ability to advocate for shows and change people's lives. After 2 years, I moved into the highly coveted drama department. No more sipping whiskey. I am throwing back the champagne. There, I was part of the team that developed the hit franchises CSI, Crime Scene Investigation, and Criminal Minds. We took the network from last place all the way to number 1. And I was promoted over and over and over. Director, vice president, senior vice president. I was competent. I was capable. I was a rising star, and I had star-making power. And then I was fired. To say that I didn't see that coming would be a huge understatement. I had the rug pulled out from underneath me with no warning. And I couldn't recover. My experience is not unique. According to a poll commissioned by CareerArc, 40% of Americans will be fired or terminated from a job at least once. And I can tell you it does not feel good, especially coming from television where stories have a beginning, middle, and end. But sometimes stories get interrupted, ending in a cliffhanger. Like when a television show gets canceled and you're left feeling unsatisfied, longing for what could have been. If only they'd been given a chance to finish what they had started. If this is unsatisfying as a viewer, imagine living it. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I had suicidal ideation. I just couldn't keep moving, and I didn't understand why. It was like a part of me had died, and yet I was expected to take the hit and just keep going. We don't grieve job loss. We don't grieve a rejected pitch. We don't grieve a failed product launch. But what if I told you that professional setbacks deserve to be mourned? What I learned the hard way, career grief is real. And it took me a decade to name it. And when I did, I finally was able to study it, research it, map it, stare it down, and spit in its face. And that's how my hardest life lesson became my cool new job, helping people grieve and move forward. And I want to share that wisdom with you. So let's take a look at career grief as if it was a crime on a television show. And on those procedural whodunits, at the end of every act break, we ask 3 questions. What do we know? What do we need to know? And where do we go from here? So, first question, what do we know? We know that most people will experience some form of career loss at some point in their lives. And the World Economic Forum reports that by 2030, approximately 92 million jobs will be displaced globally. We also know that career grief is not just about getting fired or downsized or laid off. It can also stem from professional missteps, marketing missteps, professional embarrassments. The list is endless. We also know that not everyone's career setback looks the same. I had a client who was in the military for 10 years, and her dream was to be deployed. And she worked so hard and trained for years, and she finally was scheduled. She had a date and everything. And then she became pregnant. Deployment denied. She agreed with the decision, but that long-held dream of taking all of her work and putting it out into the field, that was gone. Now, of course, she was thrilled to become a mother, but that new dream, it didn't replace the one that had been lost. When she gave herself permission to grieve, she was able to create space for the next step to emerge, which is the exact opposite of what I did. When I was fired from CBS, and after spending a year in my bedroom cave, I did go on to several high-profile jobs, but I was consumed by self-loathing. What I didn't know was that my self-doubt was actually unresolved grief. When grief goes unacknowledged, the price we pay is a loss of resilience. So, how do we bounce back? A big clue is in the answer to our second question. What do we need to know? If you're struggling with a professional setback, you need to know what was truly lost. And it's not just the job title, the paycheck, and the dream. It's really important to understand what was underneath the visible losses. What were the hidden losses? What else was tied to that job? Did you lose your sense of confidence or self-esteem when the role ended? How about your sense of belonging or your sense of purpose? And perhaps the most tender question of all, what parts of your identity were lost? We spend over a third of our lives working. It's no wonder that our jobs are intrinsically tied to our sense of self. It's why when we meet somebody new, they ask, "So, what do you do?" As if that's the most defining characteristic of who we are. And sometimes it is. For a while, I identified more as a network executive than I did as a mother. Seriously, when my husband and I adopted our eldest daughter, I intended to take 3 months of paternity leave. But being a new mom was terrifying. I went back after just 4 short weeks because I knew who I was at work and I felt more comfortable there than I did at home. So when I was fired, my identity was shattered and I felt like a failure. Despite going on to another job, I just couldn't shake that feeling. Yes, you can get another job. You can launch another product. You can join another team. But if you don't identify and grieve those hidden losses, identity, connection, belonging, you're never going to be able to integrate who you were into who you are becoming. So that leads me to our third and final question. Where do we go from here? Well, from here, we create a ritual for career grief. I'm a big believer in a good goodbye. So just as we honor the loss of life with a funeral or a memorial service, career grief needs an intentional act in order to be able to honor the loss and integrate it so that you can move forward. A lot of my clients love the idea of writing a eulogy and saying farewell. A writer printed out the script for a project that had become like a child to her. And as she buried the pages, she said, "I am so sorry that I couldn't bring you into the world that I had in the way that I had hoped and dreamed." And with that last shovel of dirt, she said, "Rest in peace." And it was with those words that she was able to finally let her beloved project rest. There are countless ways to ritualize grief, but one really powerful step is to identify a talisman, a physical object to represent the loss. An actor took old headshots and turned them into a collage, a tribute to the person that he'd outgrown. Another client, uh, this is a great one. This client printed out scathing, crushing emails and burned them. I can think of so many scathing emails that I would love to burn. Another client took a business suit and made it into a puppet, a reminder to never let other people dictate her decisions. There are also quieter ways to ritualize grief. You can light a candle to the person that you thought you had to be. Or you could carry around that talisman for a few days, feeling the weight of it, and then the lightness once it's released. Ultimately, your ritual should be personal and true to you. My ritual was simple and incredibly cathartic. For years, I had held on to files and files of old CBS development reports, feasibility studies, research pages, show ideas, remnants of my identity. I still remember opening up that banker's box and walking down the driveway to the blue recycling bin and tossing out those files, one by one by one. I was like a retired detective clutching onto a cold case, hanging onto every scrap, trying to make sense of my firing. Those files were the smoking gun, proof that I was competent and capable. But the hard truth, those files didn't prove anything because I was always competent and capable. Getting fired didn't change that. Getting fired also didn't mean that I was worthless like I thought for all of those years. Getting fired simply meant that CBS and I were no longer a match. When I gave myself permission to grieve, I was able to rewrite those hurtful meanings that I had created from what had happened. Stories that were based on flimsy evidence and misguided clues. And when I created a ritual for my grief, I was finally able to integrate the person that I was into who I was becoming. And I could finally, fully, wholeheartedly move forward. So remember when I said earlier how in the television industry we become accustomed to stories having a beginning, middle, and end? When an epic battle ends, we want a winner. When a sitcom ends, we want a big laugh. When a procedural whodunit ends, we want to know who done it. Well, here's the big unexpected plot twist. Career grief is not solvable. It doesn't get 25 years to life. It does something better. It transforms. And the best stories are stories of transformation. Against adversity and forces outside of one's control, characters change forever. Living with career grief is no different. While painful, incredibly painful, grief creates the very conditions needed for new possibilities to emerge. If I hadn't been fired, I never would have become a career grief coach. And I love being a career grief coach. Possibility is a path that opens when we integrate grief and ask what's next. So when it comes to a professional setback, what do we know? What do we need to know? And where do we go from here? Well, it's all up to you. And like any great television series, the possibilities are endless. And the season after heartbreak, it might just be the best one yet. Thank you.